I was a Christian at university in the Church of England, and I guess drifted away, as so many people do, when working life began. And although I guess I was never entirely kind of outside the Christian world, nevertheless, I was certainly not a believer. And I think, really it was lockdown that it got me thinking again, and actually listening to some of the things you were saying on the podcasts and others really got me thinking, I suppose there's more, surely the sense that something very odd had been released into human life through the podcast. These strange restrictions, these, the inability to talk to people, the inability to go anywhere, all of this. And I heard you on the podcast with Tom and Daniel kind of talking about some of this. And that was the thing that, honestly, that kind of got me reflecting on this. And really since then, over the last 5 years, I guess it's been a bit of a journey. And I've read a lot and thought a lot. And so, yes, I've ended up in the Catholic Church. And I could talk a bit about the journey in a bit more depth, if you like.
Yeah, well, I'd like to do that. But I mean, can we just dig into this a little bit, because I'm sure many people here will actually identify with what you've just said. We've had many people email us with and get in touch in other ways with similar stories of coming back to the faith, really as a result of that strange period during the time of COVID. I think a lot of people have said that it's they experienced a kind of shaking of the foundations of their worldview almost, that I think for some people, they were quite frightened and worried about what was actually going on in the world, and they started to ask themselves big questions around the existence of good and evil, the ultimate purpose of life and things of this sort. Is that the sort of thing you mean when you talk about the exploration of faith happening at the time of COVID, or how would you articulate that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. The sense that there were sort of forces outside ourselves for the first time had become kind of visible, and I didn't really have the language or the knowledge to articulate it properly, but definitely that sense. And in an odd way, the fact that the Church of England kind of shut up shop for those few months, in a way, I mean, I think it was obviously a mistake to have done so, but nevertheless, it posed the question. It forced you to ask yourself the question, well, look, there's a matter, these are matters of life and death. The church has shut up shop. Why? I have got to think about it myself. Why has it done that? What conclusions do I come to as a result of this? So in a way, although I wouldn't have wanted it, it kind of forced me to think in a way that I might not have otherwise.
Yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like the closure of the church is almost, in some ways, raises the question of well, what is the value of the church anyway? Why am I so upset about this? Or
that's right. Exactly right. Exactly right. It forced you to think, what is important about it, and why am I so bothered that the church, you can't go into a church? Why does that feel so unnatural? And I guess a lot of people just took it from there. I think.
So really, it was actually a clever marketing strategy by Justin Welby to close the churches.
You can turn anything to good, I suppose. That's the answer.
Yeah, very much so. Well, there is a scriptural verse that says just that. But let's talk about then the following years then. So it's culminated in you. Were you confirmed into the Roman Catholic Church? Were you received, or what happened? You were received.
Yes, I was actually baptized a Methodist when I was a baby, but yes, received into the church.
So what was the process that led you specifically to the Roman Catholic Church as opposed to the Church of England, for example?
Yeah, I mean, the journey could have ended anywhere, I guess, or at least I didn't know where it was going to end when it started, I suppose, is the honest question. I think there were kind of three things which were important to me on the journey and probably destined me to end up in the Catholic Church rather than elsewhere. And I mean, I don't know whether you find this talking to people, Jamie, but it's always a bit awkward talking about one's own kind of spiritual journey a bit, and there are some things you don't necessarily want to talk about. But I think there are three sort of things for me. One being sacramentalism, the whole re-enchanting vibe, I guess, that's so prominent at the moment. And I guess this sense that I suddenly realized that intelligent people could take this seriously. You know, that there was a worldview that said, you know, this world isn't all there is. And not only that, that God sort of permeates it rather than kind of setting the clock going and then standing back to see what happens. And the fact that I suddenly realized that was a reputable thing to think. Intelligent people thought this, and it was perfectly possible to pursue that. So that's one thing. And then I think second thing is like the Gospels themselves and the Bible themselves. And one of the things that I guess drove me out of, well, it didn't quite drive me out, but just made me kind of give up when I was much younger, was that the more I read around the Gospels and the more commentaries I read on them and the more theological works I read about them, the less possible it seemed to take them seriously, because the worldview at the time among so many theologians was, you know, you can't really trust the Gospels as serious accounts of what happened. They're kind of compiled from bits and bobs that people remembered and assembled to make up a story that seemed plausible to them at the time, but they're not in any meaningful sense a kind of record of a life, and you can't really trust anything. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but that's the message I got. And then when I came back to them, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, it seemed like opinion had completely changed, that, you know, there'd been a complete swing round in the theological view of the Gospels and commentary to think it's perfectly possible to take them seriously as biographies, as eyewitness accounts to a very large extent. And, you know, in a way, when you read them, and particularly if you read a Gospel all the way through, I find it incredible that anybody could really have thought that they were just kind of, you know, patchwork together, because they're just so obviously, to me, biographical eyewitness accounts, and there are things in them that just, you know, there's no reason why they should be in them other than that's what happened. So I remember one of the things that struck me was, I think it's Mark's Gospel, where Jesus cures the blind man at Bethsaida, and he rubs mud into the eye and says, "Can you see?" And he says, "It's like I can sort of see. It's like trees walking around." That's what he says about the people, and that particular remark really struck me. Like that is obviously what he said. You know, nobody's going to have made that up if the purpose of the story was purely sort of theological. And there's so much in it that is, you know, just inherently plausible, like that. So I suppose that's right. The ring of truth, exactly. So that was very important, and then I think, I mean, it comes back to where we started, I suppose. This sense that, you know, there's a kind of thing at the moment about cultural Christianity. And, you know, there have been quite a few converts who, you know, the commentary about them has been they've converted because they think Christianity is an important element of Western civilization, but they're in it for the civilization rather than the Christianity. And, you know, I must admit, I went through a phase of thinking something like that on my journey, that, you know, wouldn't it be good if society was a bit more Christian? Obviously, I don't want to go to church myself. That's a bit too much, but it would be better if everybody else did. Like, is it Voltaire, I can't remember, who says he wants his lawyer and his valet to be Christian because then they won't rob him. But, you know, he doesn't really feel the need to believe it himself. And I think actually the level of disturbance in society at the moment is so great that a lot of people will be drawn in by something like that. But obviously it's important not to stop there. I think that's the thing, that the disturbance comes because society has moved away from Christianity. It's Christianity that's the important thing. It's not, Christianity isn't there to support the civilization. It's the thing that helped make the civilization, and the disturbance comes from moving away from Christianity, and that's really what I came to think. So.